Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Andy Graham. Mike Miller's here. He kind of has to hover right now. His chair doesn't really work.
He's like in the huddle. He's
Something like that.
taking the.
Ready to go, boys.
He's got his hands on his knees, ready
He's,
to go.
he's ready. He's ready. He's ready for a handoff or something like that. Wow. Where to even begin? Where to even start this discussion? Sometimes people make jokes about Indiana being cursed. This is one of those days where you kind of think maybe there is something. Maybe somebody up there really doesn't like Indiana football. I don't know. It's one of the more heartbreaking losses I've seen anybody suffer. Game that Indiana absolutely had to have, desperately needed, to put themselves in any kind of bowl contention, just with two really, really rough games left on the list. And road trips to Wisconsin and Ohio State really needed this one to put them in position. They fall behind 35-13. They rally 26 unanswered points, 4 straight touchdowns, and down 40. They fall behind 42-39, roll right back down the field, 9 yards away from a game-winning touchdown. Chip shot field goal to tie it is looking like pretty much a lock if they can't get in. And they throw a backward pass, and they don't catch it, and Minnesota wins. I couldn't even believe what I saw. Basically, that was just sort of stunning. I don't know if I've ever seen a game end that way. Just more or less brutal all around. Just really horrendous, horrific way for Indiana to lose this game.
Yeah, even by IU football standards, that was perverse. But
Cruel.
I think it's a shame if people only remember how the game ended, rather than crediting the Hoosiers themselves for staging a really rousing rally. I mean, there were a lot of folks that gave up on them, but they never gave up on themselves, and they deserve credit for that. I mean, I think about half the crowd split by halftime and didn't come back, and it did look really bleak, and yet they kept playing, and they gave themselves a shot, and really should have won the game. And that's not taking anything against, that's not taking anything away from Minnesota, which also played well a lot of the day and certainly built a lead, and they should be credited for that too. But there was no question watching the fourth quarter of that game which team deserved to win, which team was coming on at the end, which team was making the most plays. Greg Heeman made a phenomenal play.
I barely even have a chance to mention that in my game. It was a huge play.
And Indiana was making more plays and doing more things and looking more hungry and definitely had Minnesota on its heels and was going to win the game. But a couple of things happened. They blew a coverage assignment, which allowed a wide open Minnesota tight end to get what proved to be the winning touchdown on a 50-yard pass. And then at the end, you're in position to score. You've been rolling. Almost certainly it looks like you're going to get into the end zone unless something strange happens. And it was a less than optimal play call. Look, any kind of pass down there is risky by nature. I mean, a slant pass can get picked off too. An option play is risky if you have to pitch the ball. There's lots of ways you can put the ball at risk. But throwing a swing pass that is a pattern in a manner where it could easily turn into a lateral is a really risky play to call, and then it was poorly executed. Nate Sudfeld, who played really well in relief of Trey Roberson today, didn't throw a good ball. Tevin Coleman, who had a really terrific game at tailback, didn't make a good catch. And then, when he dropped the ball, he's thinking it's just an incompletion, but it's not.
It didn't really matter. By the time he got up, I watched the play again, he got lit up by Brock Vereen.
So he had no chance.
The corner really read the play, and that was kind of the thing that made it, I guess you could say, even worse. I mean, because even if Coleman catches that pass, it's probably a 2-yard loss, basically. Brock Vereen read that. Was all over it. Right. Coleman would have had to make a tough play to even catch it. But even if it's clean, even if it's executed, Vereen was coming on strong, and Coleman was not headed.
And once again, maybe Sudfeld. I mean, that discombobulated him a little bit too, because Minnesota jumped the play.
Yeah.
And so maybe once again in hindsight, he's thinking, I should have just airmailed it out of bounds. That's right. Yeah. But Mike, you've been around football in a lot of ways. Haven't really been around Indiana football for very long, and seriously. In terms of the football karmic wheel, At some point, one might think that things would come back in Indiana's direction at some point, but seriously, given the teams you've watched over the years, have you seen that happen to very many teams before?
No, I mean, it just goes back to everything. Andy's sort of regaled me with sort of tales of woe in Indiana football history. There's, the chewing gum game. I think it was up in Michigan. There's the DeMarlo Belcher game at Iowa. Those, I guess, are just recent examples. It's just amazing. I think, I was sort of, I guess a little gallows humor. This was my introduction to Indiana football today. After a year plus covering, I mean, just you hear these stories of just total.
How could they possibly lose that way?
Yeah, and
they did.
Go ahead and lose this way, and what was pretty much the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, let's kind of address this part of it. And Kevin Wilson went out and said, "This is, this is on me." That there were some calls made that weren't good, and well, yeah. Basically, there were, and he kind of had to because it was kind of obvious. There were just a few decisions that were not just very smart. The first one, I think, being not recognizing that Trey Roberson was off.
He was not sharp, and Sudfeld needed to come in that second quarter when clearly the offense was bogging down
dragging.
and not taking advantage. The defense had four straight.
Yeah,
there were four straight Minnesota series where the Gophers didn't get a first down, and there was a big turnover in there too that the defense got to set up Indiana's touchdown. But the offense wasn't capitalizing enough. That was clear early, and you're playing against a Minnesota team where, you want to get the running game going, and Trey should be able to help in that regard. But the weakest element of their defense, and it's a pretty good defense, is the secondary, and especially when you start getting behind, the offense needs to spark. To me. I don't understand why Sudfeld wasn't in the second quarter.
Yeah,
and Minnesota rolled off 28 straight points, and apparently Kevin said there was some discussion about even coming back to Trey in the third quarter.
I don't know why he didn't see it.
Look, he knows his kids and he knows quarterbacking a heck of a lot better than I do. But to me, from my vantage point, it looked like, okay, Trey's kind of struggling. Nate ought to be able to take advantage of Minnesota secondary to a degree, and certainly that's what happened. After a while, after he got his rhythm going and after he was in there for a long enough time to get settled in, he was ripping them up. And I think that would have happened earlier had he been inserted earlier.
The logic that Wilson gave for starting Trey was that they were going to be in man a lot, and they thought you could go either way with that.
Quarterback can run against a man.
So the quarterback can run against a man defense in a spread when you're the unaccounted for man. Basically, you're going to take advantage of that when you're the unaccounted for guy. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is they're going to have man press coverage on the outside, and you can throw the deep ball, which Sudfeld does really, really well, and that's what eventually did work. Although, to be fair, a big part of what happened was they got fantastic run blocking, best I've seen for this team in a long time.
The second half, especially.
Tevin
all of a
Coleman,
sudden,
Stephen Houston were just
gigantic goals,
monster goals. I haven't seen that. Period. I haven't seen them able to run a ball against a Big Ten team like that.
Minnesota's defensive front's pretty.
It's very good, and they got killed. I have not seen an Indiana offensive line do that, and this is a patchwork offensive line.
Yeah, it is.
Obviously, we was talking
about playing a lot of backups.
Yeah,
they're playing.
But another part of it was, and Sudfeld admitted this. Wilson didn't bring it up, although Wilson kind of brought it up Monday. Was that Sudfeld had at least one day, maybe a couple, that he wasn't up to par, and frankly was getting his head locked in on the who's starting.
He's hanging his dauber a
little bit. So Sudfeld said that was a part of it, and so maybe that was the thing. Maybe Wilson didn't want to reward Nate too quickly or get it back to Nate too quickly, but I think it just became. Time was obvious, and they lost some time with that. They probably, you kind of have to, everybody's going to complain about the defense. Everybody always does complain about the defense. But frankly,
you've got they played well enough.
They played well enough to win for them. Exactly. You have to kind of
the context of Indiana, what Indiana is right now.
Yeah, this is mean to say, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to put it, but it's almost like. For Indiana's defense, it's almost like it's like a single player who's got a bum knee. Like you've got a bad knee, and there's only so much you're going to get out of it, basically. And you're not going to ever be able to expect them to hold them to 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns or whatever. If you you have to presume that at some point they're going to give up points. It's going to happen. You have to be able to take advantage of the occasions when they do make stops, and take control of the game. And Indiana's defense. Played as good as you could have asked them
most of the time
to play, considering what you usually get out of them. They came up with a couple of monster stops, and Indiana did not take advantage in large part. That was because Trey was off and Nate wasn't in.
Would you agree with that, Mike? Because a lot of people look at the total numbers as it was another bad.
They gave up
defensive
573
But-
yards. It
but-
wasn't great, but they came up through.
But wouldn't you say that was a good enough defensive performance to win?
Oh, sure. And I think one of the things that sort of sticks out is, of course, it seems like week in, week out, these opposing teams are setting all sorts of offensive records, team records, personal records, and actually they are. But yeah, I mean, the one thing we haven't seen from Indiana this year, maybe outside the Indiana State game, is just, playing that whole, four-quarter game where, they take advantage of the defensive stops and the offense responds with a touchdown, not just field goals. I mean, Roberson had some chances early on with, getting the ball, starting, in Minnesota
Good
territory,
position, yeah.
and they didn't really capitalize on that. Ended with a couple field goals. So I think we're still waiting to see that four-quarter game from Indiana.
Well, and Kevin, the way he put it in the post-game press conference, he said there was about a 20-25-minute stretch there where we were playing well as a whole. Where everything was clicking, and the offense and defense were playing off each other pretty well. The kicking game was doing well, and I think that was true. And as horrific as this loss is, and as painful as it is, and as as much gnashing of teeth as will occur with the Indiana fan base, of course, honestly, that was a pretty good performance against a pretty good team. And it should have been a winning performance at the end of it. They deserved to win and didn't. And once again, it's a sad old song, and maybe people are tired of hearing it. But there were the usual fire everybody posts on the internet after the game, and no, not after that game. You can criticize the coaching for some of the decisions, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But it was one of those games where actually, the defense put the offense in the position to win, and the offense really should have been able to follow through and win the game.
And was ready to.
And was ready to, and it just all exploded in their face. And at one point, maybe, a few things will explode in some other teams' faces, and Indiana will have the benefit of a big play at the end, and things will turn around because, on the karma equation, Indiana has about a half century worth of good luck in store at some point.
I don't know when that one's coming. Real quick explanation, because another thing I wanted to get to about Wilson, he explained the second 2-point conversion. A lot of people were wondering why he did that. His explanation basically was that if you go up 6, then if they need the touchdown and the kick to beat you. Obviously, Minnesota got there with plenty of time. I don't get really.
Yeah, because you're not going to block that many kicks. I mean, and it's an extra point.
Basically, he said it was a 50-50 when you look at the card, because every coach has the card that said what
Right.
you're supposed to do, went up this much,
Well,
how much time.
there was 5.5 minutes to play, and you're thinking maybe 2 field goals can tie you if you go up 6, but they can't beat you. So
Right.
you're thinking that maybe. I mean, I think there are ways you could look at it, but to me, the obvious thing is like, look, if Minnesota scores a touchdown, if Indiana kicks the point, and Minnesota scores a touchdown, and Minnesota
And they're
kicks
not
the
up
point, they're only up 2,
Right.
which means you can win with a field goal. You don't even have to go into
Right.
overtime.
And that's what changes the game. Instead of,
to me, it's like, you gotta
it's
kick it.
critical, because in this point,
You got to kick it.
personally, I think they were certainly capable of, if that play is an incompletion as opposed to a fumble, I think there's a good chance that they score on 3rd down, win the game, and still able to kick the field goal, and it's probably a
Did they
point.
still have 2 timeouts, I believe?
They still had 2.
So they could
I think
call a run
they
or
might
a
have
pass.
3.
Yeah.
They could have done whatever they wanted.
Done whatever they wanted.
And that kind of just makes it even more gut-wrenching, all those soul-crushing, all that kind of stuff. It's a rough one. Indiana just has Wisconsin or Illinois next week. Looks plenty winnable, but then they go on the road against Wisconsin and Ohio State. They don't tend to do very well there, and they're still Purdue on the schedule. But going to be real tough.
It's a tougher
to
coaching
get
job
a
for
win.
Kevin Wilson now. He has to keep this team fired up and going when maybe there's only the old open bucket to play for at the end.
Maybe.
But
Yeah.
that's what he's got to do now.
Thanks, everybody.